Who is T-Pain? Well, he's a lot of things. I've wanted to make a video about T-Pain for the longest time. I even referenced a bit of his career in my History of Autotune video. For those uninitiated, he's just got this type of personality that you can't help but like once you see it. The unfortunate part is that many people who know of him will never really get to see that side of him. He's got sort of a reputation, a notoriety if you will. He's known across the music industry for being that guy who made autotune popular and destroyed music, which I think couldn't be further from the truth. His real name is Fahim, and he's a singer, rapper, songwriter, and producer who has accomplished so much across his multi-decade spanning career. My personal relationship with his music didn't come into fruition until much later in my life because I was only a kid during his time on top of the world. However, even though I missed out on that era watching him grow as an artist, I'm still glad I found his music later on in life, and later listened to interviews he's given and learned about him beyond his music career. Many people know him for his meteoric rise to stardom during the mid and late 2000s, but his career and musical style had roots much further back than that. As a Tallahassee native, he grew up from the ripe age of 3 years old, exposed to the world of music. He said that his first introduction to music was in 1988 when a friend of his family named Ben Tankard, who was a jazz musician, let him mess around with his recording studio. Being exposed that early to a studio played a big part in his eventual career, but T-Pain said the first moment where he truly fell in love with music was when his dad played the song "Lift Every Voice and Sing." He'd later transform his bedroom at the age of 10 into a makeshift recording studio, and from that point, it seemed like he was destined to be a part of the world of music. In an interview with Genius, he'd said that he got his attitude towards the industry from giants like Andre 3000 and Busta Rhymes because they didn't give a shit what anyone said about them. They did their own thing and absolutely dominated music, and T-Pain would go on to do the same in the future. Ludacris also inspired T-Pain to add comedic elements to his lyrics and videos because nobody else was really doing that at the time. To me, it was clear that T-Pain was a product of his time, influenced by many different artists, but also created his own unique space in the industry. Nobody really sounded like he did before he came onto the scene, which was a breath of fresh air for a lot of listeners and other artists at the time. He'd stated that his name stood for Tallahassee Pain because of the trials and tribulations he experienced during his adolescent years living in the city. To me, T-Pain represents a tortured soul that has gone through some really troubling years in his life, but came out the other end a better man and a better artist because of it. I think he may be one of the most misunderstood artists in the industry, and I hope this video will shed some light on his story and why I think he's one of the most talented to ever do it. When most people think about T-Pain, they probably picture auto-tune-soaked vocals on top of an addicting R&B instrumental, but his career started a bit earlier than that. He had joined a group called the Nappy Heads in 1999, and they found local success in Tallahassee. He was the producer and DJ for the group when they performed, but also sang hooks for them. Unfortunately, the group eventually fell apart because other members thought they were getting unfair treatment due to their manager being T-Pain's father. At the same time, T-Pain was recording music on his own as well, and his other group members were not happy about it. Now, the crazy thing is that everyone else in the group was also recording solo music behind each other's backs. This was the sort of first taste of betrayal this man felt, and it would most certainly not be the last. However, his first real foot in the door of the music industry was when he recorded a cover of Akon's song called Locked Up, with his version being called I'm Fucked Up. In the song, he speaks about some of the things he had to struggle with, like not being able to pay his bills or his girlfriend about to have a baby, but he couldn't be there for the kid because they lived far apart. I recommend listening to it if you haven't, because it's here where you can see him coming into his own. It's also far different from his later works and showcases his vocals without them being drenched in autotune. There's sort of an eerie quality to his vocals, submerged in reverb, and the Halloween-esque piano bouncing back and forth. This one cover would be the catalyst that would eventually lead to T-Pain becoming a superstar. Akon, the artist of the original song, caught wind of T-Pain's cover and immediately wanted to sign him. Even huge labels like Atlantic Records and Interscope also wanted to sign him with offers just shy of $1 million. Here is where a crossroads came about for him, because Akon's offer was only $20,000, but he was offering a mentorship and a path to a real career. So he could either choose a big payday up front with no real guarantee of succeeding afterwards, or go under the wing of an established artist who cared about his future, and oh boy did T-Pain make the right decision. He signed in 2005 as a writer rather than an artist or a singer, and his single I'm Sprung was actually written for Akon by T-Pain, but he later rejected it, stating, "We don't do records for bitches." This could possibly be the best thing to ever happen to him, because T-Pain later recorded the song for himself and took it to Tallahassee to be played on the radio. It was an instant hit, with a mix of him singing and using autotune on the verses along with an irresistibly catchy beat. The song would go on to peak at number 8 on the Billboard charts and certified platinum, making T-Pain's first ever commercial song a platinum hit. This one song took T-Pain from a relatively unknown writer to a national hitmaker almost overnight, and he'd most certainly have the chops to back this up in the future. Not only that, but it was one of the earliest instances of an artist using autotune as a creative tool rather than a crutch for not being able to sing. There were of course artists before this, such as Cher and Radiohead, using the software, but none caught fire like T-Pain's song I'm Sprung. He'd continue to see success, releasing another single called I'm in Love with a Stripper, hitting number 5 on the charts, and at this point, T-Pain was unstoppable. There's just something about his whole musical and physical style that nobody else up until that point really had. To me, he's not just a talented artist, but a musical genius, because most of the songs he made were produced by himself, and the melodies he creates will be stuck in your head for years to come. He'd later release the debut album Rappa Turnt Singa, which was a commercial success, peaking at 33 on the Billboard 200 charts for albums. To me, the album was a perfect blend of rap, pop, and R&B with earworm melodies and smooth as hell vocals. This album changed T-Pain's life forever, because after this, he'd go on to arguably be the biggest artist of the mid and late 2000s. His best was yet to come though, because with his second studio album, the single Buy You a Drink came out and shattered records and became his first #1 single, being certified 7 times platinum. He'd go on to release his third album called 3 Rings and chart multiple songs from that album with features from huge names like Lil Wayne and Ludacris. Throughout the mid and late 2000s, it was basically impossible not to hear a song from him being played on the radio at any given time. This dude has had 48 songs chart on Billboard, 15 of which were top 10, and 3 were #1 hits. By the end of the late 2000s, other artists started to board the autotune train, like Lil Wayne amongst others, which caused a massive wave of hate towards the software and T-Pain himself. This would be the beginning of one of the worst periods of this man's life, and to me, it was entirely unwarranted. Because T-Pain was essentially labeled the face of autotune, he got an absolutely massive amount of negative media attention and a wave of people hating him for popularizing the plugin. Autotune is an extremely touchy subject for many music listeners, but I'm going to repeat what I said in my history of autotune video, and that is that I do not think it ruined music. Of course, it can be used to try and cover up bad singing and create supposed talent where there is none, but I think that's actually rarer than you might think. The big issue I have with the T-Pain hate is that I think this guy is not only a genius musically, but this man can fucking sing. If you've ever heard his Tiny Desk NPR piece, you'll know that T-Pain's natural voice is absolutely amazing. When he started using autotune, people assumed it was because he wanted to be able to sing without having the talent to do so, but the real reason he started using it was because it was a very unique tool that created a very specific sound that he liked. This is why I personally like autotune, because any new tool that artists have at their disposal to make new, unique sounding music is a plus in my book. My personal feelings aside, I think autotune would have become a massive part of the music industry with or without T-Pain using it during its infancy, and unfortunately, he became the scapegoat because he was one of the first ones through the door. Now, this period in T-Pain's career was pretty bad, but 2 things would make it even worse. Firstly, his label literally told him that he needed to slow down because he has too many hits and is on the radio too much, becoming overexposed. Artist fatigue is definitely real, but the bigger issue with this break that he took was right after he got out of the limelight, Jay-Z's Death of Autotune came out, which was probably the worst timing ever for T-Pain to disappear. So essentially, T-Pain went from being on top of the world to disappearing overnight while everyone was aboard the autotune hate train. This wasn't even the worst to come though, because he had told the story years later during an interview about a moment he had on a plane with the artist Usher. Usher had come up to him and told him, "You kinda f***ed up music." T-Pain was sort of gaslighted into believing this and went into a 4-year slump of depression, feeling like he actually had a real part in the perceived destruction of talent in music by the general public. He also considered Usher a friend at the time, so to hear something like that from someone you look up to in the industry completely crushed him. Fortunately, it wasn't all bad. He does continue to make music to this day and is just as talented as ever in my opinion. However, what pushed me over the edge in terms of supporting this guy was his career after music. The most recent era of T-Pain is that of a musician who turned to YouTube and Twitch as a creative outlet. Nowadays, he creates beats live on stream, talks with his chat about whatever is on his mind, and has given some of the most humble advice ever to people starting out in the music industry. If you aren't following him on Twitch or seen clips of his streams on YouTube, I cannot recommend his content enough because once you see it, regardless of your thoughts on him previously, I think he'll win you over with his personality. I could listen to streams of him simply talking to his chat about the music industry or personal experiences of his all day long. He's also done a fair amount of podcasts and interviews like his hour-long talk on the Genius channel or his appearance on Steve-O's Wild Ride podcast. He also plays video games on Twitch and has collaborated with some pretty popular streamers, and it's always a treat to watch him interacting with creators like a weird Twilight Zone crossover. Honestly, if there's anything you take away from this video, I hope that it's shedding some light on a guy who I think was unfairly treated and is someone that people should look up to. Even if you hate autotune with a passion, I think there should be no doubt that T-Pain is one of the most talented people to ever grace the music industry, and I believe he deserves all of the success he's got. Thank you guys for watching, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.